The weight of truth. The gym smelled of sweat and worn leather. The ring, lit by yellow lamps, looked like a stage where two men danced a choreography of strength and precision. Joe Frazier, with his broad shoulders and fists that had once toppled giants, watched Bruce Lee with a curiosity that went beyond combat. They weren't opponents at that moment, they were two fighters, two philosophers of pain, exchanging more than just blows. "You talk a lot about strength, Bruce," Frazier said, crossing his arms as Bruce adjusted his gloves. "But a strong man also needs to know his weaknesses." "What's your biggest?" Bruce stopped. The air seemed to grow thicker. He could have responded with a joke, a quip about his height or his speed, something that sounded like humility but didn't deceive him. Instead, his dark eyes fixed on Frazier with an intensity that made the heavyweight champion hold his breath. "My biggest weakness," Bruce began, his voice low, almost a whisper, "is that I feel too much." Frazier frowned. It wasn't the answer he expected. "I'm not talking about physical pain," Bruce continued, as if reading the other's thoughts. "I speak of anger. Of frustration. When I see injustice, when I see a man being stepped on by a stronger man, something in me boils. I can't turn it off. And that blinds me." Joe looked down for a moment, as if the confession had hit him somewhere he didn't know existed. He knew anger, it was the fuel that drove him to knock out opponents, the fire that made him get up after falling. But Bruce wasn't talking about anger as a weapon. He spoke of her like poison. "A fighter can't let himself be carried away by hatred," said Bruce, now more firm. "But I still haven't learned to master it. Sometimes when I train, when I fight, it's like something inside me wants to destroy, not just win. And that weakens me." Frazier didn't laugh. He didn't make a joke. He didn't look away like he would if someone tried to intimidate him. Instead, something in his chest tightened. Perhaps it was the first time I saw Bruce Lee not as the icon, the martial arts master, the man who defied limits, but as a human being, imperfect, fighting against himself. "Have you ever lost because of this?" Joe asked finally. Bruce hesitated. Then he shook his head slowly. "Not yet. But I've hurt people who didn't deserve it. I've already let anger speak louder than technique. And that," he took a deep breath. "This is worse than any defeat." The silence that followed was heavier than any punch. Frazier looked at his hands, calloused, marked by years of battle. He understood. "Maybe more than I would like." "Well," Joe said finally, with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, "at least you know that. Most guys don't even realize when anger controls them." Bruce nodded. There was no victory in that conversation, no great teaching. Just two souls recognizing that behind the strength, there was always a weakness lurking. And sometimes admitting it was the hardest blow of all. Final chapter, the last round. The following days were of different silence. Not the weight of the confession, but the weight of the decision. Bruce trained with an intensity that bordered on obsession, as if each movement could erase the marks of the past. Frazier watched him from afar, sometimes with a nod, sometimes with a frown. He knew this wasn't just another fighter trying to prove a point. He was a man trying to forgive himself. The title fight was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. The opponent was a promising young man, undefeated, with an aggressive style and an arrogance that overflowed in interviews. "I'm going to knock out this veteran in the first round," he said, while reporters laughed. Bruce made no statements. It didn't need to. The day before the fight, Joe found him in the locker room, sitting on the bench, wrapping his hands with deliberate slowness. "You don't have to do that," Frazier said, leaning against the wall. "Not for them. Not for me." Bruce looked up. "It's not about you." Joe sighed. "So who is it for?" "For me." He finished rolling up the bands and flexed his fingers. "Because if I don't enter that ring knowing that I controlled my anger, that it didn't control me, then everything I've done so far is worthless." Frazier did not respond. He just extended his hand. Bruce shook it, and in that simple gesture there was more than an agreement. There was a farewell. The gym was packed. Lights flashed, the crowd roared, and the announcer announced the fighters with an excitement that seemed exaggerated. When Bruce entered the ring, the noise subsided for a moment. He was no longer the favorite. He was no longer the prodigy. He was just a man of 35, with scars on his knuckles and a shadow over his eyes. The young opponent, Danny the Hurricane Ruiz, came dancing, blowing kisses to the audience, causing laughter. Bruce didn't move. He stood in the corner, breathing deeply, as if each breath could take away the weight he was carrying. The gong sounded. Ruiz took off like a bull, arms spinning, legs leaping. Bruce dodged the first blow, then the second, feeling the wind from his opponent's hands passing close to his face. In the third attack, he counterattacked, a precise jab, followed by a cross that hit Ruiz square in the chin. The young man staggered, but did not fall. The crowd screamed. And then Bruce saw it. It wasn't just Danny Ruiz there, in front of him. It was every mistake he had made. Every punch thrown at the wrong time. Each time he had let his anger decide for him. And suddenly he understood, it wasn't a fight against an opponent. It was a fight against himself. Ruiz recovered and went at it again, this time with more fury. Bruce blocked, dodged, but didn't retaliate. Not yet. He let the other person waste energy, let him get tired. And when Ruiz, panting, let his guard down for a second, Bruce landed an uppercut that lifted him off the ground. The young man fell. The referee started counting. 1, 2, 3. Ruiz propped himself up on his elbows, shaking his head. Bruce didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. Just waited. 4, 5, 6. Ruiz stood up, staggering. The referee held him back, assessing whether he could continue. Bruce knew he could. I knew Ruiz was too stubborn to give up. And he also knew that that wasn't what he wanted. When the referee released the fight, Bruce didn't attack. He just stood there, standing still, looking at his opponent. "Get it over with," shouted someone in the audience. Ruiz advanced, unbalanced, and Bruce easily dodged. The young man tried a hook, but Bruce grabbed his arm, pulled him close and whispered, "You're not the problem." Ruiz frowned, confused. Bruce released him and took a step back. "It ends here," he said, loud enough for the referee to hear. The judge intervened, raising Bruce's hand. The crowd erupted in boos. Some timid applause was mixed with shouts of indignation. "Coward," someone shouted. "Given up." Bruce got out of the ring without looking back. Frazier was waiting for him at the exit, with a towel and a bottle of water. "You could have one," Joe said. "I won," Bruce replied. Frazier didn't argue. "I knew it wasn't a victory the crowd would understand. But I also knew that sometimes the biggest fight isn't against each other. It's against what we carry inside us." Weeks later, Bruce was in a small gym on the outskirts of town, teaching kids how to wrap their hands before a fight. It wasn't a famous place. There were no spotlights. But there was something there that he didn't find in big events: peace. One of the girls, no more than 10 years old, looked at him with serious eyes. "Teacher, what if I lose?" Bruce smiled, for the first time in a long time. "Losing is not the end. The end is when you stop trying." She nodded, as if those words were the most important thing she had ever heard. And maybe they were. Because, in the end, that's what Bruce had learned, that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up, knowing that sometimes the greatest victory is not having to throw the last punch.